What is going on, everyone? Welcome into Bayou Bengals football talk, where we talk LSU football every single day. So let's get into it. So what I want to discuss is, can LSU beat Georgia? I think that's a big question. I think it's a very tough question to answer as of right now. But LSU, they matched up pretty well in that Georgia game up front on the offensive line. I think LSU deep down would love to get a chance to play Georgia this year in the SEC title. Obviously, they'd love to get to the SEC title, but beating Georgia would be awesome for LSU, because you feel like that's like the next step for LSU football. Brian Kelly got to the SEC title game. They competed for the most part in that game when a lot of people didn't give them a chance. So to me, winning that game would be huge for Brian Kelly and LSU. But yeah, I mean, you look at I kind of want to transition to the LSU offensive line. Their offensive line played so well in that game, and they played so well overall. Will Campbell, Emory Jones. I think Miles Frazier at guard, number 70. Frazier doesn't get enough credit. Frazier is an excellent football player, a guy that just does his job. He competes. He's always in the right position. He's always in an athletic position. He knows how to pick up stunts. He knows where blitzes are coming from. And the LSU, when you watch the LSU offensive line, you almost get a little more frustrated with Jaden Daniels, because it's like Daniels needs to. There's just too many times Daniels is just too comfortable sitting back in the pocket. In that, like, there was one play, I forget which game it was, where Jaden Daniels just sat in the pocket way too long, and he just threw basically a ball. It looked like it was going to be a jump ball because the receiver was one-on-one, and it was good protection. He just threw it out of bounds. So not only was it not only a bad throw, but just a wasted play. I mean, wasted opportunity for him to, I'm sure Brian Kelly's telling him at times not to scramble, not to get happy feet, but you just can't afford too many wasted plays like that, especially in close games in SEC play. So, yeah, Emory Jones did an excellent job. Him and Will Campbell, both the two freshmen. Emory Jones is a really good player. Jones, his anchor was tested a little bit against Will Anderson, but Will Anderson does have some power, and Anderson was a veteran. So, but yeah, Emory Jones, excellent football player, and he's a guy that's should just keep getting better. I touched on Will Campbell last episode. Emory Jones. Jones he's a guy that's quick. He gets in his stance. He gets in his set quickly. I think he's a guy that's going to give speed edge rushers a lot of problems. So yeah, I like his game a lot. I like the skill set Emory Jones brings. I think they're going to have DeLinger's going to start also. Number 72, Miles Frazier once again, and then Charles Turner has been a really good player at center. He started last year as well. So hopefully these guys stay healthy. I forget Will Campbell was out the Tennessee game. So if you get this unit together, LSU is going to be really tough with all five of those guys starting. And all these guys, they're all athletic enough to play all five positions, I believe. So yeah, LSU got it. Even though they're pretty thin depth wise on the offensive line, you got to like that they can each play. You got to like that they can, they can pretty much play all five positions. But so a burning question I have for LSU this year is: do we see Garrett Nussmeier week 1 against Florida State? Let's say this is a game. Let's say we're middle of the second quarter and they fall behind to Florida State like last year. Let's say it's a 17-3 game or a 21-7 game, and the LSU offense is struggling with Jaden Daniels. There's no really vertical passing threat, or even like a mid-range passing threat. Do they pull that? Does Brian Kelly, is he comfortable pulling the trigger there and putting in Garrett Nussmeier in that situation? I think it's an interesting question. But yeah, I mean, Florida State, this is a must-win game. must-win game for Florida State week 1. So, yeah, that's the big question. Do we see Garrett Nussmeier in this game at all? And, yeah, Mason Smith impact if he would have played against Georgia. I think we talked about this a little bit in the last episode, but, yeah, Mason Smith I think would have made a big impact. I'm not sure if they probably still do not win the game, but it would have been exciting to see LSU with an interior defensive tackle threat. And so then the next thing I want to talk about, did Brian Kelly hint that LSU can't win a national title indirectly? It was interesting. You listened to one of his press conferences about talking about the spring game. I think it was their post-spring game press conference, and they asked Brian Kelly, they're asking him all these questions, and he emphasized the concern about depth. And to me, that in a way is kind of hinting that he's not confident that they can win a national title. Now, is he ever going to say this? Of course not. But to me, a coach that is confident that they're going to win a national title in the season coming up, to me, they're saying a lot of stuff like, yeah, we have experience and we have good players, but we got to get better. I think that would be a lot of the stuff you would hear from a coach that was expecting to win a national title that preceding season. Brian Kelly, his concern at depth and especially at corner and most at corner, especially in the secondary, I think that's really concerning to me that he even goes out of his way to say that. There was some questions that I think maybe you could argue some questions spurred that on, but if he goes out of his way to say that in a press conference, then that is a concerning factor because he knows college football way too well. He knows the SEC fairly well at this point. And actually, I'd say pretty well because at Notre Dame, they were playing Alabama. They played Alabama a couple times, and then even Clemson, not an SEC team, but they got SEC caliber size in the trenches, especially in 2018 when they lost to them. So Brian Kelly knows how important depth is on the offense and defensive line. And, so to me, LSU, I think, let's say they don't have a key injury to a key superstar. Let's say, maybe a couple guys just get banged up, like just even starters, that could affect him quite a bit. And, even with no injuries, I think the more I think about this, and I'm a person that tends to overthink things, the more I think about it, maybe LSU is not quite there as of yet. Now, to say they're a year away, I think saying a team's a year away is just kind of lazy analysis sometimes because it's just kind of like, that's a long time in the future. There's a lot that could happen. Obviously, there's a lot that could happen from now until the end of the 2023 season, or even now until the Florida State game. Well, maybe not a lot, but there's some things. But yeah, there's a lot of things could happen when you're a year or over, almost 2 years from now. So to say they're a year away, I think that's, I don't think that's kind of just lazy analysis, like I said. So, but yeah, I mean, Brian Kelly, he should be confident that they're gonna win a national title. He should say I think he'll say a lot more good coach speak as we get closer to next season. Be interesting to see what he says in his next press conference in the summer or in the fall camp about how some of the younger freshmen look. Omar Spates looked pretty good in the spring game, and it seems like a lot of people are excited about what he can do. Zy Alexander looked like he belonged in the spring game. It looked like he was running with the ones. So yeah, I mean, they've done. I think they've done enough in the transfer portal. Obviously, we'll get the answer to have they done enough next year. But yeah, I think they have done a lot of good things in the transfer portal. But yeah, if one of these transfers could have like a breakout year, even if they're not like a huge difference maker, can Braden Swinson be like, can he have his like best season yet? Or Ovi Ogofu, can one of those two guys have like their absolute ceiling? Now, I don't think those guys are going to be elite edge rushers for LSU next year, but can you just get high end level play from them? Can Omar Spates be like their leading tackler and just have a phenomenal, outstanding year? I think he's capable of. Omar Spates is a guy that's played a lot of football now, so he could have a really big year for him. He could lead him in tackles. He could be everywhere. He could be a crucial part of an upset victory. So, yeah, that'll be interesting to watch. But yeah, with the LSU football schedule, I don't think it's crazy to see them starting 3-0. And then they have a stretch where, because their first 3 games I think are winnable. Florida State, Grambling, and then they play Mississippi State. But then what's telling is Arkansas, Ole Miss, back-to-back after those first 3 games. I think those are interesting games because those are 2 games where you kind of get the feel like they might drop one of those 2 games. They won both of those last year, but they easily could have lost one of those, or if not both. And Ole Miss is a really tough team. Arkansas just seems to thrive when they play LSU and Alabama, even though they have not really had the upper hand against LSU and Alabama over the years. It seems like there's some games where it's just like last year, it's just like 13-10. One year with Alabama, it's 10-7. Arkansas just likes to make it ugly. So, yeah, I think you got to believe that LSU has a really good shot of being 7-1 heading to the Alabama game. I think if you're an LSU fan and someone were to tell you right now they're going to be 7-1 going to the Alabama game, obviously you would love to be 8-0 going to the Alabama game. That's what every fan wants, to be 8-0 in their first 8 games. But with the grind of the SEC and how tough the SEC is year in and year out, and the likelihood that through 8 games you're going to drop a game, if someone said they were going to start 7-1, I feel like you would take that as an LSU fan. But LSU, the SEC fans set the bar so high that I think they would just be like, nah, we're 8-0. But 7-1 going to the Alabama game, you win that game once again, and that loss, if you beat Alabama and go to 8-1, that loss is just like, who cares? It's meaningless, because then you win out, you're in the playoff. You win out, you're SEC champions, you're in the playoff. Obviously, it's easier said than done, but a one-loss SEC team is getting in the playoffs. So LSU. And then the momentum from that Alabama win, they for sure should beat Florida and Georgia State, the remaining 2 opponents. So I think if you're LSU, you want to, 7-1, at least 7-1 going into Alabama, and then we got 2 winnable games. I think that's if you break down the schedule in an easy way to break down the schedule, optimistic way of looking at it, can we go 7-1, at least 7-1 going into Alabama, beat Alabama, and then 2 winnable games? I think that's an interesting way to break down the schedule. Obviously, Brian Kelly, he's a guy that, like most coaches, 1 game at a time in the Florida State, and like he said, it's gonna be a challenge week 1 going against Florida State. And they win that game, and that should really bolster the momentum. And I think they got a lot of guys, like Emory Jones said, his goal is to win a national title. I think LSU has a lot of guys where a win over Florida State would just, the confidence would go through the roof for LSU. So to me, that game will be telling. Does that propel them to really roll? And so, yeah, we'll see with that. But yeah, Ole Miss, even Auburn, they do have and then they have a stretch, 3-game stretch that are very winnable too. Missouri, Auburn, Army. So you got to believe, like if someone told me that LSU lost one of those 3 games and still won the SEC title, I would have a hard time believing it. You got to believe that if they're going to do something special this year, that's a 3-0 stretch. Auburn, maybe Auburn's improved. Army, even if Army is a decent team this year, LSU has better talent. And then Missouri may be a competitive team this year, but LSU has better talent. So those are I guess the point I'm trying to make is those are 3 games where not only should you be favored, should you expect to win, but you have more talent and you have more difference makers than all 3 of those teams. Auburn, some years it was kind of a toss-up. You remember 2019, Auburn was actually the one team that played LSU closer, but that's when Auburn had a lot more NFL players. Derek Brown, Igbenogany, Seth Davis, Auburn had actually true difference maker, and they had size up front, especially on the defensive line. So yeah, hopefully you get a nice 3-0 stretch there. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for LSU. I think it's gonna be a fun schedule. The SEC schedule is always fun. Is Florida a close game this year? I talked about Florida on my other channel. I think Florida is going to be improved. Billy Napier Florida should be hungry this year to improve on the season they had last year. They wanted to win more games especially when you have a superstar quarterback. But Florida has kind of that weird feel like maybe they're going to be better. Sometimes you lose a superstar, and the immediate reaction is we're immediately going to be worse. But that's not always the case. Each team is different. Each season is different. The way a team gels is always different. LSU, even though they do return quite a bit of players, this team is different than the 2022 season. And that's what I think with Michigan football, too. Even though Michigan was 12-0 last year, and Michigan's probably better, it's not always a given that they're going to be 12-0 again. Same with LSU. There's no guarantee they're going to be at least 10-4, even though you could argue that this team is better than last year's LSU team. If someone said LSU goes 8-4 this year, I think that would be a bit of a surprise. But would that be shocking? I don't know if I'd say shocking. I think it'd be surprising. I think things happen. I guess I don't know. To me, LSU should be better than last year, but yeah, I mean I guess I kind of made that point. Yeah, things vary by year. And then so I kind of want to go back to Jaden Daniels he's got to make better decisions with the ball, and there's too many times where. I wish he would really stretch the ball vertically. I think that, one of you guys commented about Garrett Nussmeier being the guy. And to me, Garrett, Nussmeier could be, Nussmeier does bring the vertical passing element. I like his release. It's not like the quickest, but he does throw a tight spiral, and the ball does jump pretty well off his hands. I think what you saw in that Georgia game, I think that was what the LSU offense could look like. Can it be consistent? I think is the question mark. I think that, Georgia was kind of playing a little bit relaxed, but I think, still to do what Garrett Nussmeier did when he came into that game, I think that has got to leave you a little room for, I think that's got to, make you scratch for more, I guess, if you will. But yeah, I think there's some LSU fans. I'm not sure. I don't know. You guys can comment. I think there's some LSU fans that do want to see Garrett Nussmeier that actually would go with Garrett Nussmeier as opposed to Jaden Daniels. But yeah, Jaden Daniels, when you watch LSU repeatedly, you start to really get a appreciation for what kind of runner Jaden Daniels is. I mean, this is a guy that changes direction super well. It looks easy the way he moves. He kind of just glides. It doesn't even look like he's really trying. Jaden Daniels, when I scouted him last year, I thought he was going to come out after this past season. I didn't have much of appreciation for what kind of a runner he was. I was too busy focusing on his passing, which, I did not give him good grades for, especially as an intermediate and long ball thrower. But, as a runner, there maybe you could argue Jaden Daniels is the best pure runner at quarterback in all of college football. Is he probably not the best scrambler or thrower on the run, but he's definitely not bad at throwing the ball on the run. Yeah, for LSU, Jaden Daniels, he's got to play well. He's got to really shine. There's got to be, I think early on, to me, I always say a guy can improve, but sometimes the guy just is who he is at a certain point. He's not really going to get better. If you think about it, most guys really don't get much better other than how they are, what they can do at skill-wise as a freshman in college, they usually do not improve much after that. Now, obviously, you could argue that point a lot, but if you think about it, some guys, when guys break out after the freshman year, it's more so due to opportunities and playing time. It's not as much them changing, it's not as much their skill set or their strength just magically increasing. So with Jaden Daniels, to me, though, I don't know, a lot of his problems passing, I don't think you're ever going to fix. Maybe he can be a little sharper. Maybe you can help improve his decision-making a little bit. Maybe he can make one or two more big-time throws in the Alabama game or in the SEC championship game that help them win. But is Jaden Daniels next year drastically going to become Joe Burrow as a thrower? No. So, to me, Jaden Daniels, can he make quicker decisions? Can he make some runs? Can he make some big-time runs at key times? Can he convert some fourth downs? Can he make a couple of fourth down throws? I think that's going to be big. And then the offensive line, if they do match up with Georgia, can the offensive line hold up for 4 quarters like you could argue they did? And then can the defensive line, do they have the depth? Can Mason Smith be a force enough? Can they get into a game where in the fourth quarter you're like, man, they got a chance to win this? Because you could argue, because Brian Kelly goes, if they got that, they were stopped on a 4th and inches when they were down by what was the score at that point. But if they would have got that and scored, they could have made it like a 37, 38 to 50 game. And he was trying to make a case that they had a chance. But, that game was, you had the feel it was over. It was one of those games. That was kind of a weird game. It was like, LSU's not going to win, but you also, get the feel like they're going to, keep putting up points and making it semi-interesting kind of thing. So yeah, if you hope for LSU, it's not a game like that next year. You hope that LSU really is in a dogfight. It's back and forth scoring. Maybe they get a couple key stops. Now they got some stops in that game, but when they were getting stops, they were down by like 2 scores, 3 scores. They did not get a stop. I don't think they got a stop, maybe one stop when it was a 1-score game. So can they get stops when it's a 1-score game? And then, if they are exchanging if they are in a tight 1-score game, does Brian Kelly pull out the 2-point conversion? Does he pull out a fake field goal? This is all hypothetical because this game's a long ways away, but I'm just thinking about, what possibly could happen against Georgia. So, yeah, we'll talk the LSU linebackers. So, Harold Perkins, it all starts with Harold Perkins. Harold Perkins had a nice spring game, obviously phenomenal game last year. Brian Kelly was happy about the way Perkins played in the spring game. Perkins is just a freak athletically, like I've touched on in the last couple episodes. To me, Perkins, I think, is a guy that could get a little stronger. I think he could get a little better at taking on blocks. He is a guy that, just being undersized naturally, does kind of get engulfed by offensive linemen a little bit, but just has such quickness, side-to-side movement that he can just get, there's times he doesn't even really need to use his power. He can just go around him. So to me, Harold Perkins, he is just a guy, I think, that was just made for any linebacker position, whether it's Mike, Will. Looks like Spates is going to play the weak side, so that'll be fun watching those two guys. I think they complement each other well. Spates kind of the guy that you're going to want to drop into coverage more, read the quarterback, play some zone coverage, and you kind of just keep Harold Perkins free, let him go get the ball, let him run sideline to sideline, do his thing. Maybe you run some delayed blitzes with him. Spates, to me, is not a guy that I think you want to blitz often. I think you just want Spates dropping back into coverage, playing that hook curl. Maybe you have Spates move into Mike and play that deep middle. But yeah, Spates just a good all-around football player. I think that's why a lot of LSU fans were excited about getting Omar Spates, because you're just getting a rock-solid linebacker with experience. And then, the safeties, too. Greg Brooks, just a really good football player. I think that's what Spates is going to be for LSU. Like Greg Brooks, a guy that's just a really good player in good positions, does have the presence of mind to know how to create turnovers, whether that's forcing fumbles, stripping the ball out, creating interceptions. I think that's what you're going to get. Major Burns, another guy. Hopefully, Major Burns takes another step this year and plays a little better. I thought he could have played better. Sage Ryan, another guy. Sage Ryan at safety, former 5-star guy. He looked like he did all right in the spring game. I think Ryan is a guy that, kind of like I touched on how some guys, play better once they get opportunity. Maybe Sage Ryan is just a guy that needs more opportunity to play really well. So hopefully that's the case for him. This is a guy that was their second highest rated recruit in the 2021 class, just behind 2022 class, just behind Harold Perkins. So hopefully you get some high-end play from him. So, yeah, the running back. They ran LSU, landed Logan Diggs, transfer out of Notre Dame. Diggs, this is a guy that's, you're going to add some depth. LSU, that's one thing. Even if John Emery doesn't play, that running back, they do have some legitimate depth, which is awesome. You can never have enough depth, it seems like, at running back because, college football, it seems like there's, in the NFL, even in college, running backs, their value has kind of become into question, but you can never have, having a rotation seems like the way to go as opposed to having one bell cow. Alabama kind of started that trend years ago with, when they'd always have at least two guys, and then now it seems like a couple years ago they had three guys, and then LSU, LSU kind of was they did kind of use Fournette a little bit as a bell cow, I know, and then they had they brought in Darius Geis too, but yeah, I mean. Yeah, the running backs coach at LSU, the guy now, has done a nice job, especially when he was there 2010 to 2015. Brian Kelly talks highly of him. Kelly talks highly of Denbrock and Matt House, the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator. So I think that's cool that Brian Kelly, he seems like a guy that does have a lot of faith in his assistant coaches. Brian Kelly is a guy that I think. He's not like a power-hungry guy. I think he respects his assistant's ability. I think he lets them coach. I don't think he's necessary. I think he's somewhere in. I don't think he's a CEO. I think he's somewhere in between, a guy that's, lets his assistants do stuff, but knows how to step in and demand, the power for certain things. So yeah, I mean, LSU coaching staff is pretty strong. Not a lot of people talk about. When you talk about LSU coaching staff, Brian Kelly is always the topic conversation, and rightfully so since he is the head coach. But, you look at other top programs, they do mention assistants. But, yeah, to me, it doesn't – the fact that people aren't mentioning, like, assistant coaches as much with LSU, I don't think is a big deal. I think that they are confident in what they have assistant-wise, and yeah, I didn't really know some of the assistants' names, but now when you watch their press conference, you do. It is kind of fun to hear Brian Kelly mention, oh, yeah, Matt Denbrock doing this. Matt House is confident in this guy. So, yeah, it's, coaches and assistant coaches, I think, have a special bond. And, it's tough in this era where, coaches are always leaving. So we'll see. This year still has to unfold, but maybe if Denbrock or House, if their offense really thrives or their defense really thrives, maybe they're going to get an opportunity elsewhere. But until for the time being, LSU seems to have a pretty good staff in place overall. But yeah, I mean, so LSU, we'll touch on the receiving core briefly. So, yeah, the receiving core. Chris Hilton, I was disappointed by how many passes he dropped in the spring game. Chris Hilton seems like a guy who, there was a lot of times where he was getting open. He just dropped the ball, or, he just, I don't know, almost slowed up on a deep ball. To me, Chris Hilton, at least with his ability to get open, if a guy drops a lot of passes, there's kind of two ways to look at it. It's one where, maybe he just doesn't have the best hands, which could be the case, but also he's getting open. If a quarterback's throwing towards a receiver, it's usually for a reason. It's usually because there's some sort of separation. So can Chris Hilton, even despite the drops and despite not being super productive, can he get open more frequently next year for LSU? I think it does pose a question. The receiving depth, certainly is going to be something to watch this year. Can Sampson or one of the other receivers that they bring in, is one of those guys going to break out? That's what I touched on in the other episode. Malik Neighbors is going to get his. Knock on wood. Hopefully, Malik Neighbors is healthy this year, because maybe that's what Brian Kelly's referring to or thinks about. Malik Neighbors. God forbid something happens. He's going to be their guy, and they're going to find ways to get him the ball. They have to make an emphasis to get him the ball this year. So. And Kyron, I think that's why, he talked about Kyron Lacey specifically, because Kyron Lacey is got to be, even if he's not their number 2, can he be a strong number 3? Can he have some games where, to me, the way, as much as Brian Kelly in the press conference talked about Kyron Lacey, it must mean he sees something in it. Just to me, coaches, especially in the springtime when there's, they're saying stuff, a lot of coach speak, like we got a lot of things to work on. If a guy's saying a guy's name in the spring, there must be something he's doing right. So to me, there must be something Brian Kelly sees in Kyron Lacey that he can improve his game, and they can get more out of him as far as reaching his full potential. But yeah, we're just over 30 minutes total, so I'm going to wrap with that. Thanks for tuning in to Bayou Bengals football. Make sure to stay tuned. This has got the best LSU football talk right here. We talk LSU football daily. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, peace.